Welcome to the Film Illiterates podcast, your home for uninformed, unfiltered, ill-advised movie talk. As always, I'm Joe Campbell, and joining me today, as always, is Alex Patton.
Hello.
And Nathan Stone.
Oh shit, are we starting? 1 second. Let me zip up. Flush. Okay. All right. Sorry, guys.
Nate, are you recording on the toilet?
No, I was recording on the toilet, but now I'm off of it.
I didn't hear any water going. I didn't hear you wash your hands, man.
Oh, okay. Well, let me
We're in the
go
middle
ahead.
of a fucking pandemic. Wash your damn hands.
Dude, we're coming out of the pandemic, all right?
Washing hands is optional now.
Just like everything else.
God.
Whatever feels good, man. Whatever feels good.
Speaking of feeling good, how do you do, fellow kids? Do you like sick... I'm not going to read this, Nate. I'm sorry. I won't be able to read this with a straight face.
I didn't write it this time.
Okay.
For Alex.
Alex wrote it. Okay, I'll make an attempt.
One, yeah.
Alex wrote it. I'll make an attempt.
Mind you, I wrote this like right before I went to sleep, so keep that in mind because it's.
All right, here we go. I'm going to try it. I can do this. How do you do, fellow kids? Do you like sick maymays and peeing frogs? Well, you're in luck because today we're talking about Feels Good Man, the 2020 documentary about Pepe the Frog and his creator, Matt Furie. This was Alex's choice for this episode, which should be obvious, and not just because he is the only person having us watch documentaries, but of course, before we take a trip with the boys club, we're going to talk about what we watched recently.
Good job.
There we go. I did. Once I got past the first couple sentences, I knew I was in for the home stretch. So
Yeah, I wanted to make it sound as terrible as I could.
All right, Alex, since this was your choice for us to watch Feels Good, man, why don't you tell us what you watched first?
All right, you don't need to say it like that every time, but
I will.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so I've recently watched The Imitation Game.
Good movie.
It was pretty decent, you know. It seems kind of like just one of the, big Hollywood biopics that's cool and interesting to watch, but like at the end, it didn't feel all that mesmerizing, really. Like it's great performance from Benedict Cumberbatch. He's great in it, and the story's cool and whatnot. But yeah, it wasn't something that like really wowed me. I originally had it on like a 3.5 on Letterboxd, and I think after time it kind of dropped it back down to 3. It just wasn't didn't have much of a lasting power, honestly. I don't know. It's one of those movies that it's good. It's not great, and it's not like terribly bad or in any way, but it's good. It's a good, solid movie. Not much to complain about. Nothing like crazy insane to praise it for, but good job.
The last time I saw this was when it was in theaters, when I was working at ArcLight. And I pretty much watched everything back then because I got free movies. So I just, every weekend I would just, pound out as many movies as I could.
I mean, that's the best life to live, right? Isn't it? Just
Yeah.
live in a movie theater.
Pre getting married, doing nothing but watching movies, spending all your time in a dark theater. It was great, man. But so this was just kind of one of the ones that I cycled through with all the other movies that I was watching at the time. But I don't remember very much specifically about it, but I do remember enjoying it as kind of this wartime drama.
Mm-hmm.
I do actually remember the one thing I did like about this movie was like when they actually cracked it and they mastered the code, and there's like, oh my gosh, we can save people, and they realize, no, we can't. We have to pick and choose who we save and when we save.
That was a good that was a good bit of like a twist to it, honestly. And it was a nice shift because, like, the whole movie is building up to the moment that they finally crack it. And then now you're stuck with how do we actually use it in a way that's not going to give up the secret.
Yeah.
But yeah, Imitation Game is a decent recommendation for me. It's kind of one of those movies where it's like if the idea of it interests you, the plot interests you, sure, go ahead and watch it. It's not something that I think you'll be really entirely wowed by. But like I said, nothing real wrong with it.
It's a dad movie.
It's a dad movie.
It's a dad movie. It's the sort of movie you take your dad to go see.
Oh, fair. Yeah, I actually that makes a lot of sense. Actually, yeah, I get that.
I've never heard that term before, but I'm going to use it now. This is.
Oh yeah, that one, Monuments Men, I think is the ultimate dad movie.
It's a good one. Yeah, man, I haven't seen that in years. Jeez.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thanks. The other movie that I watched, I finally watched The Matrix.
You finally watched it. Wow.
Yeah.
Joe, can you slap him across the face from across where you're at in Washington, right?
Across state lines.
I'm just happy that he gets to. I'm jealous. He gets to experience it for the first time.
Let me ask you, dude. I mean, we knew
Hmm.
each other in college, and you had never, ever seen The Matrix.
Yeah, I think we had it assigned for a class, and I just didn't watch it.
I think it's funny that out of all the movies to skip for a class project, you skip The Matrix, which is like a piece of popcorn sci-fi entertainment.
Oh, it's more than that. It's
Yeah,
like
I would say it is more than that.
Oh no, yeah, I'm not saying it's just that, but it's not like you're skipping Where the Red Fern Grows or Waking Ned Divine or something.
Yeah. So Matrix, yeah. I of course I've seen bits and pieces of it over the years, as it's obviously a super super popular late '90s movie, but yeah, to finally actually like get to sit down and watch the entire thing in one go, it was, man, it's I mean, yeah, it's a cool movie. I'm not gonna deny that, of course. It's incredibly dated, not necessarily because of like the CGI and whatnot, because the CGI actually looks pretty good for, especially considering the time and what they're working with. Yeah, the CGI was actually quite good, and it wasn't used in a super flashy, annoying way either. It wasn't like, whoa, now check out this insane shot with CGI in it. And it was just kind of used supplementary, which definitely plays to its advantage.
Because I think like with the set pieces, when they actually try to show that off, like, her freezing in time to do the jump in the air and the kick, or the bullet freeze time, those stand out. Those do stand out.
Yeah. And they're just done tastefully.
Mm-hmm.
But when I say it's dated, I mean like kind of the way it looks. A lot of sci-fi 90s movies will look a certain way, and just the soundtrack and the clothes they wear, it's just, God, it's so 90s. Ugh.
Oh, you don't like the leather and the sunglasses?
No, I do not in the way that they're doing it. There's a lot more to it than I kind of originally thought. Before seeing it, to me, Matrix had always seemed to be one of those movies that was like trying to be deep and like thought provoking, but in the end, like really wasn't. And no, there is a good bit of depth to it, which yeah, honestly, kind of surprised me a bit.
So, fun fact: before we did Film Illiterates, and I can't remember if either of you guys were involved in this, but we were shopping around different kinds of YouTube shows to film. Around that same time, Katie and I also filmed a pilot episode for a YouTube show that we never got off the ground. We never did anything with, which was the idea was that we were going to look at classic or super popular movies and see if they hold up. And we shot a video for the first one, and the first one we did was on The Matrix. But in that video, which I don't even know if the footage exists anywhere at all, I don't think it does. I think our consensus was that, yeah, The Matrix is a really cool movie. We think people hype it up a little bit too much and think it's a little bit deeper than it actually is, but it's a really cool movie. And anyway, yeah, that's deleted footage that no one will ever see or remember.
Aw, gone. One other thing I would like to point out with The Matrix is how great Hugo Weaving is in the movie.
Dude, you just put Hugo Weaving in anything. He
Seriously,
just makes it 10 times better. I'm even like Captain America, First Avenger. Gotta give him props.
And he didn't like being in that movie, and he still gave a hell of a performance.
As Red Skull, best Red Skull ever.
Yeah, that man is an absolute powerhouse.
Yeah, The Matrix is it's a classic, and it's a classic for a good reason. It's really interesting and well shot, even if it does look quite dated now. I'd say, I mean, the length is kind of maybe a bit much, and there are a few points where it's like, how are they going to get out of this one? Oh, it's Neo because he's the one, and that's the reason. And it's like, oh, okay, all right, we'll play along with it, but it's kind of a little of a bit of a cheap answer. Either way, it's a classic, man. Like I said, it's a cool movie. There's a lot of cool stuff in it, and yeah, I got no real complaints with it.
That's one I've been meaning to revisit since it was added to HBO Max recently. I've been looking at that and thinking I haven't watched that in a long time. So maybe next episode I'll be able to come talk about it.
I was watch the sequels.
Yeah.
And the anime.
Well, I'll say the Animatrix is actually really good, worth a watch.
I haven't seen the Animatrix. I've seen the sequels, and
the Animatrix is actually kind of follows the same pattern that Love, Death, and Robots kind of follows on Netflix, where it's like just a bunch of shorts compiled together, set in the same kind of universe. So if you think about it, like, okay, this came out in like 2001, and it was the first to pioneer in that, kind of like explore that universe on that level again. It's not bad. I'd say you would like it, Alex, because of the animation. They get a bunch of animators to, recruited to do them.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as the sequels go, I don't know. Matrix Reloaded it has some good set pieces and some good thoughts. I don't know if I can say the same thing for Matrix Revolutions. Sorry, Joe.
Matrix Revolutions has some phenomenal set pieces, I've got to say. In any case, both of them are still. If you just want spectacular action filmmaking, I would say the sequels deliver to it to an extent.
Fair enough, yeah. But anyway, that is what I have watched recently. So, Nate.
Yeah, thank you. I was going to actually ask if I could go next. So,
go for it.
Not too much that I've watched. The two I've been trying to catch up with is basically what Marvel's been pumping out right now. So right now, they just wrapped up on Loki, and they had just recently released Black Widow in all theaters. So I decided to watch both of them. So here's just my hot takes on both. Black Widow, and you guys can probably go on Letterboxd and see my review of it. It sounds like I gave it a bad review, but I actually do like it. What I'm just upset with is that there's so much hype around Natasha Romanoff as a character, as this female action hero of the Marvel universe. And the way it was handled, the way it was executed, I felt they could have done more with it. There's a lot of stuff I do like about it. I like how they introduced the Red Room, these girls who get, recruited and then brainwashed to become like, espionage, assassins. But I don't feel like it went further enough. And that was my problem with the movie, is that this was a chance for it to kind of go and explore that a little bit more. Maybe not, deteriorate too much from the actual story, but still actually give us something that Marvel can say, hey, we're kind of amping it up after the whole Endgame. Like, you guys thought Endgame was good, we're going to take even further. And had a chance to do that, and I feel like it missed it. Maybe it was just the way it was directed as well. Joe, I think you've read my Letterboxd review. I wasn't too thrilled with how they shot it like a Jason Bourne movie, both, cinematography and editing, because I just don't think it stands out. But otherwise, I think everyone did a fantastic job. I think, Florence Pugh and Scarlett Johansson really work well as sisters, like estranged sisters who haven't like bonded with each other in years. And even Rachel Weisz and David Harbour, they provided some great comedy feel to it. But I don't know. I feel like for a movie that got pushed back and hyped up so much, it could have delivered a little bit more.
Yeah, I've seen it. I enjoyed it more than you did, I think. But yeah, I mean, to each his own.
No, that's fine. And now for Loki, this was one that when it started, I was really invested in. I liked where it was going, the places it was going to explore with time travel and the whole multiverse that they were trying to set up with the Marvel universe. And then the conclusion it came to, I kind of feel like it could have easily said one thing and it could have been reduced to a 2-hour movie. I don't know if it needed to go the whole length of a 6-episode show, but it was good. I thought, Tom Hiddleston was great. The whole cast was great, but I think a lot of the themes they explored could have been summed up in a 2-hour movie. And I don't know if they had to go this far.
Wasn't Owen Wilson in the show?
Oh yeah, he was actually one of the best parts of the whole show.
Is he really? I was so surprised because I haven't seen it, but I've seen trailers. I was so surprised seeing him in the trailers because I guess that's kind of like the last thing I'd really expect him to be in.
No, he plays his character very well. I mean, he's just kind of like, this Mobius character, kind of almost stoned, just kind of like being blasé and kind of like coasting through it.
I mean, yeah, that's him.
I will say Richard Grant kind of makes an appearance in this, and he kind of almost steals the whole series, honestly. So I won't explain who he plays, but if anyone has not seen it, check it out. I just say, like, for what it was trying to accomplish with setting up the whole multiverse, could have easily been said in like a 2 hour movie. So that's another discussion for another day. But both of them pretty good. I'd say I liked Loki a lot more than Black Widow, but that was just me.
Yeah, I agree. These Marvel shows in general, they're structured like movies, and that's a problem for the television format.
Yeah, I mean, if you're not gonna like progress on a serial level or just like show something new and different happening and it working like a serial, just do a movie. A movie's better. I'll still watch it if it's a movie. And then the last thing I'll talk about, just because I was kind of curious and never seen it before, was the 1992 mafia gangster biopic Hoffa, directed by Danny DeVito and starring Jack Nicholson as Jimmy Hoffa. The story about the notorious American labor union figure who organized a bitter strike and made deals with members of an organized crime syndicate and then mysteriously disappeared in 1975. So, have you guys seen The Irishman at all?
Yes.
No.
Okay, so Joe, you've seen The Irishman. Honestly, I'm not against Al Pacino, but I think Jack Nicholson does a better job at portraying Jimmy Hoffa than Al Pacino did.
Okay.
And honestly, this was like actually watching The Irishman kind of spurred my curiosity to watch this movie. Verdict, it's okay. It's not like the best of gangster movies. And in fact, it almost feels like it's an imitation of a lot of Scorsese and Brian De Palma movies. And it doesn't do anything big or new, but it's kind of a clunky movie. Not against Dan DeVito. I mean, you kind of look at his track record doing Matilda, Death to Smoochie. It's probably one of his better movies he's ever directed. But I think it just doesn't fit very well. It tries too hard to be one thing, and it's just Jack Nicholson's trying too hard to kind of steamroll the whole movie. So overall, I think Jack Nicholson still does a better job at playing Jimmy Hoffa. And actually, I'll say the guy that they got to play Robert Kennedy in this movie, freaking fantastic. Like, you can watch the courtroom scenes and he's got the accent and the mannerisms down to a T. Like, I've never seen a better portrayal of Bobby Kennedy in any kind of movie, any kind of biopic than this guy. But as far as a movie goes, other than the courtroom scene, I wasn't too mesmerized by it. So, slight pass on me.
Yeah, Danny DeVito as a director is kind of fascinating. If you look at his filmography,
Mhm.
I think the only one that I've seen is Throw Mama from the Train, which is a comedy, which is what I think a lot of people associate Danny DeVito with.
Mhm.
But then you do have stuff like you got Hoffa, then you got Matilda the year after that, and then Death to Smoochie. So he's kind of all over the place genre wise with his movies, it looks like.
I mean, I feel like comedy is a little bit more of his forte, but I know like this was like his big, drama biopic piece, but he's just borrowing too much from the masters and he's not doing it well enough to make it work.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone feels like a caricature of like a Scorsese movie, which is not necessarily a compliment or anything like that. But yeah, that's what I watched. So Joe, what did you watch?
Alrighty, I'm going to go over 3 movies from 3 consecutive decades. First, from the 1970s, 1978, Jaws 2. I've been on a blockbuster kind of kick recently. I rewatched all the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. Now I'm working through all the Jaws movies. Jaws 2, I pretty much feel the same about it as I always have. It's a decent movie. Jaws 1 is obviously one of the probably Steven Spielberg's greatest movie. And the one thing I noticed here watching Jaws and Jaws 2 back to back was that Jaws 1 has so many character details that on their own you probably don't necessarily remember walking out of the movie, but they do a lot towards holding the audience's interest and giving you something to care about as the movie goes on. For instance, Hooper. I never think about the fact that Hooper is pretty much just like a rich boy who bought a whole bunch of oceanographic, whatever, fish hunting gear, fish science. The words are escaping me right now.
Words are not working for Joe right now.
Yeah, words are not working. But he studies fish, and his family is rich, and he inherited a lot of his family's money, and he's using his family's money to buy big fancy equipment to further his interest in fish science. And he's always kind of trying to prove himself. That he's the one that compares his scars to Quint's scars. He's the one that he jumps on board, and he's very demanding about, no, I'm bringing this gear. This is what we're going to do. So he's the one butting heads against Quint the whole time. Quint's always going against him because he's this city boy who never had to work a day in his life. And then you got Brody. Brody and his family just moved to Amity Island like in fall, and now it's summer when the movie takes place. So it's the fact that the Brodies are outsiders to the island is kind of a running theme, because the Islanders all say that, oh, you guys will never actually be Islanders. You have to be born here. So there's kind of this theme of they'll never fully accept the Brodies, but the Brodies are trying damn hard to be accepted by the Islanders because this is where they live now. This is their home. So it's kind of fascinating how it's a struggle to be accepted in the fact that they're screwing everything up even more for themselves. Jaws 2 has none of that kind of character work in it. Brody is just a raving madman who's crying shark again, and quite honestly, I would have fired him long before the characters in the movie do, because there aren't any confirmed shark attacks. We as the audience, we see shark attacks early in the movie, but there's no real definitive proof that there's an actual shark attack, and you just have Brody running around saying, there's a shark, there's a shark.
Right. But I guess for me, I always kind of accepted that because he's recovered from PTSD from the first experience.
Well, yeah, exactly. And that's why I wouldn't trust him as much, is because I think like, oh, just because you were right last time, you're always going to see sharks now. It would be my thought if I was the mayor of that town. And then the next thing he does is he brings a picture of what he claims to be a close-up of a shark, which if you look at that picture, it could be anything. And he's saying it's a shark right after he opened fire on a crowded beach. So I'm surprised they didn't fire his ass long before they did in the movie. Anyway, this is me knocking on Jaws 2, but quite honestly, I think it's a damn fine monster movie. It's nowhere near as good as the first Jaws, but it works as kind of almost a more traditional teenager slasher take on Jaws, and it's got a couple of good moments. It drags quite a lot throughout, and without the character work, you don't really get as invested in it as you did in the first one, which makes it feel slower than it actually is. But that finale is pretty fun. So yeah, mild recommendation for Jaws 2. Next in 1980s, from 1989, Pet Sematary.
Nice. Hey, I know that one.
Which, for those who don't know, listening to this podcast, we have a video review that Alex and I did on Pet Sematary from 2015. So look that up on YouTube. Film Illiterates, Pet Sematary. You can see our review. Honestly, Alex, I rewatched our video, and I don't think I agree with a lot of the points I made in that video now.
It's like
Really?
looking back on it now, it's like, maybe I wasn't as clear-headed when I thought about
For one thing, there's a lot more kind of cringy humor in that than I remember there being. I think I'm going to find this in a lot of our early videos. There's some editing choices I probably wouldn't make now that I did back then. I rated it on Letterboxd at the time as 3.5, and I said in our video, I think I said it was just like, yeah, it's a pretty good movie. And I said at one point that I don't think I'll ever watch this movie again by myself.
Well, you broke that promise, didn't you?
Yeah, exactly. And I said that if I ever watch this again, it'll be when I'm showing someone else to see their reaction. Well, a few months ago, I bought the 4K Blu-ray, and I popped it in the other night, and it's a damn good movie. It's a very well done little 80s horror movie. It's got some cheesy, corny stuff in it. Some of the acting isn't top notch. Some of the acting is top notch. It's got some effective kind of gross out stuff in it. It is kind of corny, but it's also it delivers genuine scares in a couple of moments. So it's a mixture of kind of all these elements that I like in movies. It's got some of the B-movie fun to it, but it's also got some really horrific stuff, and it's also got some horrific stuff that kind of goes a little over the top and makes it comedic also. So yeah, I do a high recommendation for Pet Sematary. Still don't watch our video because it's interesting to kind of see how I think our tastes change a little bit over the years. If nothing else, watch our video just for the closing sketch, which was a bloody fun time.
Yeah, it was.
We put so much work into that. I keep forgetting how much work that was.
So yeah, high recommendation for Pet Sematary. And then finally, from 1997, I watched Breakdown, which is a road thriller starring Kurt Russell. Have either of you guys heard of this movie?
I have. It's an interesting, kind of like when Kurt Russell was kind of still riding his bandwagon of being blockbuster movie star. I think he had just done Tombstone as well.
Around that time, yeah. So the brief synopsis just off IMDb: a man searches for his missing wife after his car breaks down in the middle of the desert.
Oh, that's the reason why it's breakdown. Never mind.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's a road thriller, kind of in the tradition of something like Road Games or The Hitcher, which I really enjoy road thrillers. Just 80s and 90s, people driving their cars out through the middle of nowhere, and they run into trouble. They run into bad people who are trying to accost them. They run into something. They're far away from home, out in the middle of nowhere, no cell phones.
Yeah, they run into Nicolas Cage with a prosthetic nose.
So I went into this one honestly not really expecting a whole lot, because unlike Road Games and The Hitcher, this is one that people really talk about, and I was very surprised at how much I actually enjoyed this movie. It doesn't have the style and the kind of finesse that something like The Hitcher does. The Hitcher is a very dark, very grimy movie. It's got a lot of shadow, and it goes super far with how edgy it's going to be. Breakdown isn't like that, and a lot of the scenes are shot very flatly, a lot of just kind of the camera just watching the action happening. But the script itself is a hell of a script that moves everything along. Kurt Russell is given a damn fine performance, and the final act just kind of tries to top itself again and again, going over the top and over the top, and how much can we do with this crazy premise? So it's kind of like, what if you had The Road Games meets The Vanishing, where it's just a guy trying to find out what happened to his wife. She disappears. She gets picked up by a trucker because their car breaks down. She hitches a ride with the trucker, and she just disappears. The guy Kurt Russell can't find her after that, and he's searching around to find her. And I would highly recommend checking out Breakdown as kind of a forgotten road thriller. It's not one of the best. If you want a really damn fine road thriller, again, check out The Hitcher, check out Road Games, which are kind of top tier. But this one gets the job done, and I quite enjoyed it. And with that, we will move into Feels Good Man.
I've just always been into drawing. It takes tons of time to come up with a character. And then eventually it was Pepe. It's a happy little frog. We like drinking and hanging out. It became Boys Club.
It's one of the funniest comics of the last 10 years.
Feels good, man.
That was the frame that started it all.
Artist Matt Furie, creator of the comic character Pepe the Frog, begins an uphill battle to take back his iconic cartoon image from those who used it for their own purposes. So, Alex, this is a 2020 documentary directed by Arthur Jones. Tell us, why did you pick this for your pick?
It's about memes.
That's it. That's all there is to it. Life is memes.
Thank you for listening to our podcast.
Kind of another friend of mine had I think recently watched it and highly recommended it. So I had heard about it sometime last year, and it kind of like came and went across my radar without me really paying a whole lot of attention to it. And so seeing it pop up again, I was like, oh yeah, that'd be a good one to watch. And I'm kind of into documentaries a bit, and I'm interested in like documentaries on like kind of like internet culture and stuff like that. Seeing a documentary about Pepe the Frog of all things, and then hearing that it's actually really good, dude, I was stoked. I was totally down to watch it. So it was just that was why I wanted to watch it, because I thought it was something that's pretty far outside of, I guess, what the movies that we normally watch for the show, for the podcast here.
Yeah, we normally don't do documentaries on this kind of a scale, but
the only other documentary that we've done was Jared Dreams of Sushi, which was also another one that I picked way back when. So yeah, it's just the kind of unique subject, and the fact that it was getting a lot of great reviews prompted me to suggest it for the podcast.
So this was your first time watching it for the podcast?
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now, that being said, having watched it now, what are your initial thoughts, and did you like it?
I really liked it. I actually ordered the Blu-ray and a TV and like a T-shirt from like the film's website.
Oh, nice.
So
yeah, he's finally become a Pepeer, or is there a term now for people who follow Pepeers or Pepe?
no.
No, we'll cut that joke out.
You know what's funny is that I was on the verge of making like an alt-right joke, but after seeing the documentary, I would have felt bad doing it. So
Yeah. What was your guys' initial thoughts? And I thought it'd be interesting too to kind of talk about what was your introduction to Pepe? Was it the movie, or had you already seen the meme elsewhere?
So I guess I'll start. Initial thoughts. I really liked this documentary. I can't praise this thing enough on just how good it is. And I know I haven't done a letterbox review of it yet, but I think the one thing I just liked about it is how it really felt like when I was watching this is like I just got a crash course on the history of the internet in the past 20 years. It's almost like Internet 101 college edition. I've never seen something explain the process or even just the manifestation of the internet as well as this documentary did. And I just thought I was getting into like, okay, who is Pepe and what does Pepe stand for? But it's more than that. Arthur Jones, the guy who directed this, along with like his team and Matt Furie, to try and explain what the origin of Pepe was all about, which originally I didn't realize it was part of just like kind of an offbeat comic book series called Boys Club Comics. I mean, and that kind of segues into my introduction to Pepe. I only knew Pepe from what people like talked about as far as like internet memes and culture. And my exposure, my thought of it is that it was just something that you would just throw out there just to trigger a conversation. Like it could just talk about anything. You could talk about like Shia LaBeouf and then throw Pepe in there and it becomes a meme fest. It becomes like a meme battle. And it's just how outrageous can you get it? So my thought with Pepe at the beginning was, I don't know who this little cartoon anthropomorphic frog is or his face or why he's grinning, but apparently this is enough to get people really angry. And that's as far as I understood about it. But watching this documentary, seeing how it went from one thing and it grew into something else kind of really explains why that face is such a trigger for most people.
So I'm going to jump in first off talking about kind of my relation to meme culture and Pepe in general, which is that I have none.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, I like memes. They're funny. I subscribe to the couple of meme subreddits that I enjoy because they make me laugh. But as far as quote unquote meme culture in general goes, I am not that deep into it. So my understanding of Pepe is just purely on, I recognize the image because I'd seen it in memes before. I knew that supposedly it had been attributed with the alt-right, and that it was considered generally not kosher to use it, I guess, in memes or something. At the same time, I'd seen so many people over the years really overhype things about how egregious and how dangerous things are, sort of thing. And I kind of figured that similar sort of thing had happened with Pepe. I kind of had heard that, it was made by someone else somewhere else, and then it had been appropriated into this kind of more offensive context. Which didn't surprise me because that's how memes work in general, is you take someone else's work and you give it a new kind of context. And that's generally how memes work. I would see a Pepe meme and I think like, that's supposed to be offensive, but probably not. I don't really know. I didn't really care. I didn't really read too much into it. And so watching the documentary was fascinating because it was kind of what I expected in the way that, someone made a thing and it got turned into something he didn't intend. I loved this documentary. I thought it was a fantastic documentary that, I don't want to say it opened my eyes to what goes on the internet, but it just shed more light on what I kind of already knew, but really in depth.
Yeah, it is wild how, as such like an innocuous way that, Pepe began as just a random webcomic turned into something, so something worthy of an entire documentary is pretty wild.
But I think the reason why it like is able to actually merit its own documentary like that, because it's really showing like something bigger than beyond that. Like Pepe, if you think about it, it could have stayed what it was, which I think was just a reflection of just Matt Furie's own weirdness and his lifestyle that he wanted to reflect on. And that probably wouldn't have gone anywhere because it would have just stayed in that little niche. because it took the journey that it did, it's more than that. I think Pepe is just kind of like a representation of just internet culture in a nutshell. Like all you have to do is just see that frog's face and you get what journey the internet has gone through in the past 20 years.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of like the I guess the process of it running away from its original meaning, and you have all these different variations of Pepe and whatnot. So it's just meant to reflect whatever the poster is, the person posting it is feeling, depending on the specific image and variation that they use. With it kind of running away from its original meaning and like blowing up in a very unexpected way. One thing that kind of sucks with it is obviously not only its use in circles that shouldn't tarnish such nice things.
It's a very nice way of putting it.
Yeah. One thing that does suck about it too is because it gains so much infamy is a lot of like the general public's introduction was through media coverage of like the alt-right and whatnot, which is, it sucks because despite what it kind of became, its original meaning of, people just using the frog as a reaction image or this or that, it was fine. And so now it's just tied to this huge thing. And for a lot of people, that's their only knowledge of it, is just on the database of hate symbols.
Pepe became a meme. I didn't even know what a meme was.
There were all of these boys trying to own each other on the message boards.
In drops Pepe, right for the taking. He had gone dark.
The white supremacist movement has taken over Pepe the Frog.
Yeah, and actually, I'm going to say this as well. I think what helped with this documentary the most was the editing of it.
Yeah.
I think I'm just fascinated with how it was able to show how the original creator, Matt Furie, had intended and what he was trying to do with Pepe, with the Boys Club comic. And then seeing alongside that, what was happening with Pepe in the internet culture, how it was going from 4chan to the alt-right and what it was manifesting into. And just seeing the dichotomy of that was a complete just eye-opening experience, because you're seeing what Matt Furie just originally intended Pepe to be. He didn't intend him to be this, symbol of triggering people or to, be offensive or anything like that. He just was like, the cute frog, and him and his buddies are hanging out, eating pizza, playing video games. This was supposed to be like a reflection of his childhood and his lifestyle. And you see other people just loving that. But then at the same time, you see this other story going on. You see what Pepe is becoming, how it becomes like a reason for people on 4chan to symbolize this is our culture, to the point where they can actually just wreak at normies just because they get so upset with them. It's like just seeing that side by side, and almost like Matt Furie not being oblivious to it, but kind of like slow to catching up to like, wow, this is what my creation has become, is fascinating. And if anything, just to watch that is an experience in itself.
Mm-hmm.
I will say, looking at the original comic, at least from what I saw in the documentary, Matt Furie's sensibilities don't really seem to be the sort of thing that really line up with my sensibilities. I mean, for me personally, it kind of came off as like, oh, that's kind of weird. There's the frog's butt and he's peeing into a toilet. Okay, whatever. But I got the spirit of the fact that he made this thing that it spoke to him. It spoke to a lot of other people, and it was very innocent and very funny and charming. And I will say, after watching this documentary, I have never been so inclined to buy a children's storybook as the one that he made later on, that I really want to get now.
Oh yeah.
With the other frog who is not Pepe.
Yeah. No, actually, that was kind of curious. Is like he actually made like a children's book that has no words, but it leaves a lot to his imagination.
A sweet, fantastical children's book, it looks like.
Yeah.
And you know what? I'm gonna actually say something I really do appreciate about Matt Furie as a person, is that while there are so many people, different communities, who are trying to latch onto Pepe and make it their own and just being possessive about it, he's just living his life as a cartoon artist, doing different projects, raising a family, meeting people, just being himself. And I think, if anything, that's the one takeaway I get from Matt Furie, is that he's just a normal guy.
I felt so bad for him watching this documentary.
I know, because he made this comic originally just to be like, this was my youth, this was my childhood that I just want to kind of like preserve and reflect as like, hey, this was something I resonate with and I just want to share with people. But at the end of the day, he's still a creator. He's still going on. He's still making other stuff. It's just now that when people think of Pepe and him as being like the creative Pepe, they have this negative connotation when they don't even know him. And if they get to know him, which this documentary does a very well job of doing, he's a very down to earth, kind of quirky guy.
Yeah. He's really just like he's really just kind of like a harmless nerd. Like,
yeah,
that's what he is. And what's interesting too is there was Adam from Your Movie Sucks. He did a 3-hour long, not really interview, but just like talk with the creators, Arthur and Giorgio, and with the two guys were working on the movie, and they were looking for funds to make the movie and whatnot, and they would go around and they'd mention Matt Furie, and then people would be like, oh, isn't he a neo-Nazi? People didn't realize that Matt Fury is just this random artist that unfortunately got caught up in this huge thing, and because of it, like, his essentially job as an artist was pretty much threatened because of his unwilling connection to everything going on and what Pepe became. And yeah, he couldn't really essentially be an artist and make money, and because of everything that had happened. I just thought it was interesting.
Yeah, that was actually kind of a sad scene. Actually, there's that one part where I guess he was trying to launch this this kind of like, campaign
the
to
t-shirts and stuff
the t-shirts.
like that.
Yeah, like he had worked with this vendor and this girl who actually liked the boys club, but now she has a garage full of all these t-shirts because nobody wants to touch them. And they don't know what to do with that. That's like all that investment, all that money they lost, and it's just sitting in inventory.
Yeah, it was around like $45,000 worth of merchandise that they couldn't sell because everything going on, and yeah, they were just sitting on it because you couldn't do anything with it.
Right.
And like even his roommate got a tattoo of
oh my god,
Pepe on his arm below his sleeve. And
honestly, this edification of this documentary made me, I guess before I didn't realize Pepe, the face of Pepe, was associated to something like a swastika. But now seeing this, I'm like, I can see why. And I really kind of do wish this creation worked a little bit more in Matt Fury's favor and didn't become what it was. At the same time, seeing the kind of path it took, I guess there was no turning back after that.
One thing I wanted to talk about specifically was that I found really refreshing was the documentary's depiction of like online culture and memes. Because I feel like this is one of the few films that actually gets it right.
That was actually my comment too, is like, I think this is like the best honest portrayal of how the internet works.
Yeah. And it a lot of movies that'll talk about like memes and stuff like that, they come at it from a very outsider perspective. Yeah, not saying that the guys behind it are shit posters on 4chan, but they're a little bit younger, and so they have a better idea of how this stuff works, and the way it's portrayed isn't cringy, which is a breath of fresh air, because so many other pieces of media that aren't directly from the internet will often portray it in this weird dumb way. I guess that's kind of why I wrote the intro is like, how do you do, fellow kids? It's kind of like that.
It's like it's kind of like almost like you've dumbed it down to a level of like, oh, you're treating everyone who does memes as preschoolers. Like, no, it's not. It's more than that.
Yeah. They actually understood the importance of memes to the internet, and they didn't try to treat it like this stupid joke that only the internet kids are gonna understand.
Well, let me ask you, because like these guys you mentioned, they're fairly young, but they grew up during that time, that culture, so it was all around them. Like, this is why these communities post Pepe, or why they actually generate these memes on this level. It's a reflection of that kind of community, and it's a reflection of like, hey, we all want to see if we all belong and feel the same way. So the way they edited it, the way they portrayed that, is less of actually just trying to, as you mentioned, it's less cringy in them trying to like, oh, we're cool and hip. And it's like, no, we're just trying to be honest and show this is what this group thinks. Feels
like I said, and they didn't portray it in a negative light. Obviously there were things that, are negative in the documentary, of course, about internet culture, and covers it quite extensively, which is good because yeah, there are those things online, especially on 4chan. But like the introduction of just general memes and giving like kind of the backstory of how Pepe became so well known and so widely used, was just giving it its proper due, its proper attention and respect in a weird sort of way, without like patronizing it and making it feel, they weren't dumbing it down really, which was I appreciated that immensely.
Yeah, I've got to say, Alex, after watching this documentary, the
Mhm.
internet is fucking terrifying, and we should burn it to the ground.
Oh my
Nah, it's
gosh.
all right, man.
Oh yeah, there were times in this movie where they were really going deep into the progression of how the meme got bastardized and how it changed,
Mhm.
and it got deep into the mentality of the people who were using it and seeing why they were using it this way. And I was looking at some of these lifestyle choices during those times. I felt like I was watching a documentary on this is how you make a serial killer at, at those points, and then they would have this kind of like dark, kind of creepy music playing over some of the stuff, and all these really kind of off-putting images with some of the crazier memes, and saying like, "Oh, look, here's Pepe in front of 9/11," and more outrageous stuff. I'm like, I want out,
Yep.
please. And then also we
Yeah.
get back to Matt Furie. I'm like, okay, everything is zen now. I'm back in my happy place.
Yeah.
It was a nice little balance of like terror and then peace and zen. It's like, yeah. One of the scenes, I'm going to throw this out there, the scenes that kind of shocked me was, I guess, when we were segueing into the 4chan community and how they
Yeah.
got on board with Pepe and how they picked that one person who they were interviewing, where it first starts off at his suburban home.
Oh yeah.
And his
Mills.
parents, like the parents have like, they're cooking vegetables. There's like family and faith plaques hanging on the walls. And then he just turns around in his hoodie, goes downstairs to the basement, and you just see his entire bedroom trashed, and there's potato chips and just food rotting in the corner, and his internet running at like whatever gigs just to hold all that memory space. And I'm like, that's a reflection of Americana we never get to see. But it's an eye opener because that is kind of part of this culture that exists like that.
Yeah, yeah, it was cool that they actually talked to people who were, not like some like university experts on meme culture, but like talk to people that were like, that is their culture.
It only did get weird when we did go to that university professor who was magically moving books and in a library. That got a little weird. I don't know what he was getting at, but
Yeah, I guess that was to give it a little bit more of a, I was almost want to say intellectual, but that's not.
It did come off that way. It did not come off that way.
He felt like the sort of person that I would bump into in Seattle and would tout himself as some sort of expert. I'm like, okay, yeah, you're you're just some crazy person in Seattle or Portland or whatever. You keep doing your thing, but it's all bullshit.
There was one point I did want to talk about, and it's specifically in regards to the part in the documentary where they're kind of talking about how Ree became a part of Pepe. I thought that was interesting because I've seen kind of examples of that just in other interests of, people from kind of the outside coming in to a weird sort of part of culture and trying to fit in. And I honestly, as much as 4chan does deserve a lot of shit for a lot of the stuff they've done, I almost kind of want to defend their reaction to Pepe sort of being kind of adopted by a lot of people outside of 4chan, because like I said, I've seen it in other interests and whatnot before, but kind of in defense of that and not in defense of 4chan at large. Let me make that clear.
Okay.
But just in that kind of like knee-jerk reaction to, it's trying to defend essentially what makes your group unique and prevent it from being turning into something far removed from like the original ideals, and keep it, from being completely distorted. And this happens kind of especially in cases of kind of more like the like outsider groups, which 4chan and is definitely is. But it's trying to prevent people who share nothing in common with the group trying to assimilate into the group without like actually fully embracing its weirdness or what makes it unique. And I guess an example of that would be, super into music, black metal. It's a very elitist kind of genre, in that a lot of the people that listen to music don't want people kind of taking the music and sort of like bastardizing it for, I guess, profit, as specific albums kind of became super popular among people that weren't already familiar with the genre. And kind of the knee-jerk reaction to that was, to scream and to call and to fight to try to keep the genre, what it's been, and stop just general elitism. And so, like I said, I understand that like reaction to it, and I guess I can kind of offer a little bit of a defense for that specific thing again.
Well, okay, let me throw in devil's advocate then.
Okay.
As a response to that. What if that's just, I'm really trying hard not to throw in gatekeeping specifically into this. But isn't that struggling against natural evolution?
Like progression?
Because well, not even progression, but just I mean things and their meanings change just kind of naturally over time. I'm thinking of when the Sparks documentary that Edgar Wright just made.
Mm-hmm.
Sparks is a very, I don't want to say it's an underground band, but it's a band that not a whole lot of like mainstream music listeners know. I like music from the era of Sparks. I had never heard of Sparks before.
Mm-hmm.
Watching the documentary, I then got into Sparks. I love their music. I think it's great. But I'm sure there are a subset of people out there who gone their whole lives loving Sparks as it being a very personal band that means something very specific to them. And it's kind of like, oh, people aren't listening to these guys. These guys are really weird, but these are my people. Now all of a sudden you got, people like me, a meat munching, Pat Benatar loving person here who's someone that says like, hey, I like Sparks too. I mean, it might not mean the same thing to me, but I dig the music. Aside from the fact that I find that whole subculture of 4chan, I'm not saying 4chan as a whole, but that specific, what do they call them, like the neat, I find that just real, like that sounds like a chill down my spine, like that like what they stand for according to the documentary. But all that aside, the fact that they took a meme for themselves as a very personal and I almost want to say kind of rebellious, in that like this is our thing, and it's a little bit provocative at times too, but it means just kind of something very specific to us. And then other people taking that same meme and it means something very different to them. But I don't see why you can't just kind of live in this whole, it seems like a very juvenile response to me to say like, no, you can't have that, and now we're going to suddenly take this and we're going to turn it into something intentionally provocative. It's throwing a temper tantrum because people are taking something that you hold very personally, and
that is right in pretty much its entirety is kind of a temper tantrum.
And actually, that was one thing I was going to say is I think that's actually the initial problem with Pepe from the very beginning, is that Matt Furie didn't really defend his original intent or what Pepe stood for from the very beginning before he just unleashed it. And because of that, it just took different communities to latch onto it and become more possessive of it, to the point where, you're right, when other groups wanted to intrude, they get very butthurt. But I think it's because for them, I think Pepe's for them is just, it's more than just like an icon for representation. It's their only means of attention. And that was actually one thing I put down here, is Pepe is the perfect example of everyone on the internet being attention whores. Like, it could be just any subgroup who would want to take Pepe, but their intentions for using it is more than just to represent the community. It's just to get enough views or enough likes just to be on the top of the list. And when it becomes that, it's already, that's the monster you're feeding. And honestly, not to like bash Matt Furie, but I feel like because he kind of like unleashed it like that, it's the reason why it became what it is.
I think in Matt Furie's defense, I don't think he was aware of what was going on with it, because he's not on 4chan.
No, and I think that's actually the wonderful dichotomy that this documentary is representing, is that there's different people out there. There's people like Matt Furie who just want to live their lives. They want to create. They want to be the best person they can be and not exist in that world. Whereas other people, the internet is all they have. If they lose that, if they lose that power, if they lose that influence on people's opinions, their world shatters. They don't know how to build themselves up after that. Whereas Matt Furie, he could care less what happened to his creation. He would still go on creating. What just hurts him is that people always go back to associating him with like, you're the worst person ever because you made this frog. When Richard, that was never his intention. It's just he wanted to reflect his culture, his lifestyle. But then other people were the ones who took that and used it as their means of, this is all that we have, which I think is kind of a petty move on the internet's part.
Yeah, and I to be clear, I'm not necessarily. I understand that, like, you know, evolution of different cultures and whatnot is something that's necessary. And in my you know, example of black metal, the specific album that, you know, triggered a lot of people was an album that I actually love, and it was my introduction to kind of black metal as a genre and whatnot. So it's not necessarily like I'm not in defense of gatekeeping and elitism, I should be clear. But just that, like, I've seen that kind of reaction before, and like I know why it kind of comes about, and I understand it. I guess that would be more of my point there.
Yeah, that's fair.
But getting back to like the documentary and whatnot, another thing I kind of wanted to talk about is, you know, what was the goal of the documentary and whether or not it kind of accomplished that. Was it just purely a just informational, you know, is just retelling the story of the creation and descent of Pepe, or was it more of something we're trying to get people onto Matt Furie's side and kind of, in a way, maybe try to reclaim the meme as something for good?
I mean, I'm going to say I think it was both. I think there was an intention of showing this is the original origin of Pepe for anyone out there who still thinks that he is this kind of like this trigger symbol of the alt-right. His original origin was the Boys Club. And I think that was the creators, or at least the documentarians, like initial purposes to show this is where it came from and this is why it became what it is. But I think if anything, it's coming to the defense of Matt Furie to show he is not this awful person for launching this creation out there into the open. It's really just the monster that the internet is that created what it is. And really, I think the big question was like, can he ever reclaim it? Isn't really up for him anymore. What the documentary is showing is how he can reclaim it back to its original origin is if we give Pepe the, I would say, like the almost like lily pads to jump back to that original spot.
It's a good way to put it, yeah.
Because I feel like what happened is Pepe was just kind of being tossed around from lily pad to lily pad, and he went off in this direction. But now there's this chance, yes, for him to come back in full circle. It's really just our culture's decision if we want to use that. I know, like, spoiler alert, there was this part in Hong Kong with the riots and like the protests that were happening where they were using Pepe as a symbol of solidarity, of saying like, no, we're going to take this little frog. We understand the alt-right's used it for this, but we're going to give it new meaning and new purpose to show like he stands for us and the hardworking people of Hong Kong wanting to fight for labor rights. We want to fight for independence. And I felt like that is the path that can start going back to make that full circle. It's really just, is our culture mature enough? Is it responsible enough to do that? Or are we just going to be selfish and use it for our own means? That's the big question.
I guess to me, that's a critique of mine of the documentaries. I wish they had covered, if not maybe more of the Hong Kong protests use of Pepe, but just other people, besides Matt Furie, other people's kind of efforts really to kind of reclaim and reuse Pepe in a good way. And I guess this is something actually that the directors talked about in the conversation with Adam, in that, you know, for documentaries, you're kind of, especially if you're making on a documentary on something that's currently going on and currently evolving.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing with Pepe, is like it's still going on. I don't think it's like died off yet. So
yeah, it's where you kind of decide to stop filming. It's like, do you get enough footage for a movie and don't wait and see how it ends? So I feel like, or do you let it sit for a while, let it come back in a few years, just to get it like an actual ending? With Pepe, there's not really ever going to be necessarily an ending to the saga, but and I this may be just an unfortunate thing where they were kind of essentially done making the movie and had to edit it and had to put it out there. I wish they had covered a little bit more of just people's use of it in something good. It's kind of made a bit of a resurgence on Twitch as far as like emotes go and whatnot. In a way, yeah, I wish that was something that the documentary kind of covered a little bit more.
Do you feel any personal responsibility for the bad stuff that has come out of this?
Whatever Pepe meant to all these other people didn't mean the same thing to me. I'm doing everything I can in my power to shut these assholes up.
Answer the question I asked you.
Can we turn a recognized hate symbol into a love symbol?
And I kind of go. This kind of goes in hand with another question that I wanted, to talk about is like, can Pepe ever be reclaimed? So
that specific question actually ties into kind of my general thoughts on the message of the movie in general. I think my biggest takeaway from this is that as far as internet culture specifically, but I think you could probably extrapolate this out to just how we as humans react to things in general, especially things that we have made our own and take very personally. I think you just kind of have to let things take their own course. You can fight it in whatever ways you can, but just know that you aren't in control. I was thinking about how earlier in the movie, there's a point where Matt had this coordinated effort to try to reclaim Peppa. He tried to make it all right. Let's make it a positive thing. Make positive Peppa memes. Everyone make positive Peppa artwork. And I saw this coming in the documentary even before they revealed it. I thought, oh, this is going to backfire spectacularly because the people that they were fighting are the sort of reactionary people who will just take that as a challenge, and all of a sudden they turned something good into something beautiful into something.
They just made it worse,
like even worse. You're trying to reclaim it. Well, we're going to double down and we're gonna hit harder back at you. And the only thing that really made a difference, it seems, was when he just took legal action. He wasn't creatively trying to take anything back. He was just trying to say like, well, okay, what actionably can I do that will make the most difference? And that was not creating more Peppa stuff in an attempt to reclaim it, but just saying, you can't tell people on the internet, all right, you all need to take this down. All you can do is control what little circles you can and try to stop what damage has been done. But in the end, it's just going to take its course. And of course, eventually, it's going to turn into something different. Like we saw at the very end, it had been claimed by the Hong Kong protesters. It was just a wildly unexpected direction. I hadn't heard about that before, so I didn't expect that.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of saw some like little pictures like when that was going on, and I saw like the frog kind of like pop up here and there. I was like, what's with Pepe? Why is that happening?
Yeah, so the end result is that things will take their course. Sometimes it'll be bad, sometimes it'll be good, but all you can do is try to make good art and just keep putting good, beautiful work out there and hope that gets the recognition.
Yeah, I think the only way for Pepe can be reclaimed again is when people start taking just ownership of themselves and their lives, not basing all of their actions or their reasons to trigger people on a community. I feel like with, the biggest example is Matt Furie, a man who's just taking ownership of his life. Yes, he's taken legal action to fight this, but if anything, at the end of the day, to him, Pepe is like the least of his creation. I think if people realize, taking this frog as a means and some kind of validation for our purpose and existence needs to somehow kind of go to the wayside. It's only going to happen when you actually take ownership and actually move on and be the best person you can be. That I think Pepe can be reclaimed again. And that's me. I get off my soapbox. Or you can just be a dude who just cashes in on Pepe Cash and drives a Lamborghini and just.
Out of all the other random things like associated with Pepe, I wish they'd chosen something else to talk about as like.
That was a weird side plot that kind of went nowhere. It came in with the guy driving in, it went out with the guy driving out. It was never referenced again. I think they could have cut that pretty easily.
I mean, if I can imagine any level of just self-indulgence, then some guy who just makes his own Pokemon theme song to Pepe Cash.
Yeah, from the conversation with Adam, that the guys had with Adam, they had a lot more stuff. Like this could have been a 2-hour documentary with how much extra stuff that they had. And there's a lot of like different offshoots of like Pepe and whatnot that they just couldn't cover because, you know, it'd be a bit too unwieldy of a documentary to really get into everything.
I will say for an hour and a half, it did a really good job of covering as much ground as it did. I was impressed.
Yeah, and I guess in talking about you don't want things to run on too long, shall we move into closing thoughts?
That's a good call. good segue into that.
Hey, thank you. So, Nate, go ahead. What is your general thoughts and review of the movie?
I feel like this is something, and for anyone who is unfamiliar with Pepe, who has bad impressions with Pepe, what this character stands for, just watch this documentary. I think it's worth just your time and investment just to sit down and look at this, because there's a lot I got from this, a lot that, you know, me kind of growing up in this generation, in this culture, and being so out of the loop of things, this was kind of a way to just catch up to speed and just understand this is kind of how this beast of the internet does work. And where can you draw the line? And I think the guys who made this, their intentions of showing the real story behind Matt Furie was done very well. Granted, there might have been some biases involved with showing different groups, but I feel like, if anything, just to give you that journey, it's edited, it's done very well. Like, I can't find any qualms with that. I have this new appreciation for Pepe, which is like, not saying I'm for Pepe, but I have an understanding now, like what he does stand for. And it's something I really do like. And then as far as movie moments go, there's two actually I want to call out. One was actually, Joe, you mentioned this earlier when he tried to start the Save Pepe campaign. And it just immediately just segues into the Reddit column taking that and saying, good luck. I thought that was just edited perfectly because it just shows this whole dichotomy at play, this whole struggle. And then I think another moment I really liked was the death of Pepe. Just because, like, when the artist realized I have to kill my creation, if anything, just to bury this and not either have my name tied to it or just let this keep going on, or because of what kind of a Frankenstein monster it's morphed into. I thought that was a good moment because immediately after that, it just segues into the guy driving up in the Lamborghini with the Pepe Cash talk. And I was like, wow, this will never end. But I think those were two moments I think stood out to me the most, just because of polar opposite the edits were to show here's what he's doing with his creation, and then here's what the other side's doing.
Joe, what did you think about it?
So when I was a kid, I had a little comic I did for fun, and I made a whole bunch of little comics on my own. And I was just thinking about, what if I had scanned those into the computer, put them on the internet when I grew a little bit older, and what if that got adopted into something horrific and offensive against my will and spread like wildfire? And that's what that little cute little comic I made as a kid, what if that was all it was associated with? So I was watching Matt's reactions to Pepe, and I was just thinking, I was thinking about my own little things that I made for fun on my own and out of joy and wholesomeness. And it was just horrifying and depressing and very sad to see what had happened to this guy and his creation. So it was very relatable for me on that level. And it was also just very eye-opening as far as how internet culture works. You know, I can draw the lines between how things evolve on the internet, but to see such a very specific A to B to C to D progression was fascinating for me to watch. And again, kind of horrifying. This whole thing was very, I don't want to say stress inducing, but very depressing at times. And it was also very wholesome and wonderful at times just to see, even though Matt had gone through all of this, he still seemed like a very zen, cool guy that was just trying to make something beautiful in his life. You know, they kept on cutting to, he has a little girl in the movie, and he's just raising her and just trying to make the best life for her. It's not really focused on that strongly throughout the movie, but it's there. And it's just showing how this guy is just trying to do the best he can in all of this fury of anger and hatefulness that's just surrounding him like a cloud. So yeah, I would highly recommend checking out this documentary. My movie moment would be there was a certain point in this movie where it took a weird left turn where they got the occult expert talking about magic and vibes and how they can make things happen. And I just, what is going on here? Why are we going in this direction? Which I can't say I dislike the fact that they were going in that direction. because it did keep me guessing, like, well, where are we gonna go next now in this weird and wonderful journey. But yeah, it was a point in the movie that was notable for me.
Got it. Yeah, that was an interesting one. Him talking about like Darwin and stuff. I really enjoyed the movie. Talked about it a little bit before, but it's one of the few movies that I think gets internet culture right and doesn't necessarily make a joke about it. It's one of the few movies that shows internet culture for what it can really be. It doesn't cover a whole lot of the good, but it does show a kind of, the darker side of the internet, and so it can be a really eye-opening movie to people who aren't familiar with this kind of stuff and how often this stuff goes on the internet. It's an hour and a half. It doesn't take too long to get through, but it just covers so much ground, and I feel like this is one of the few, I guess, subjects on like internet culture that really works super well as a documentary, not only because I guess is the online aspect of it kind of interesting, but it works well because it made the jump into kind of the real world, and the film handles it really well, I think. Not only in just giving you all the information, but like making a documentary on internet stuff is oftentimes hard to visually show. And I think a lot of the graphics, the animation that they put together are gorgeous and fantastic, and definitely highlights of the movie. But yeah, it's very informative. It's very well done, and like I said, it never comes across as portraying a lot of the stuff as kind of cringy, which is very hard to do, and it's often done by other movies. So yeah, honestly, it's a very high recommendation for me. And I think the directors talked about during production of the movie, they had something called the thin green line, where whatever they were showing or whatever they were putting in the movie, they always had to bring it back to Pepe. And I felt like that really helped, because it could have gone off on any number of tangents and kind of lost itself and where it was really trying to go. But by keeping it kind of grounded and having that, line that they weren't going to cross, and this has to be all has to tie back to Pepe. I think that it helped it immensely, and that it's not, while it does cover a lot of ground, it's not something immensely sprawling that you're going to kind of lose interest in completely. There are moments like we talked about the rare Pepe cache and the crypto thing, which I can argue, I feel like you can argue didn't really have much of a place, but that's just a tiny part in an otherwise extraordinary documentary. So it's a very high recommendation for me. Super good movie. I'd say my movie moment would be a little after like the half-hour mark. I think that's where the documentary really starts to pick up speed. Up until then, we're kind of getting an introduction to Matt Furie and just Pepe as a character, and then shit hits the fan around like a little after the half-hour mark. 40-minute mark is where we get into really the descent kind of into madness of where Pepe had been taken.
It's been a while since I watched it, but was that the moment when they're explaining where Reet came in?
That was just after.
Okay.
So that was more of the moment where the alt-right came in.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
I was trying to remember because it's been a while since I watched this about like 2 weeks ago. So I'm trying to refresh my memory of like when the halfway mark was. Was it when the alt-right came in, or was it when the incels came in?
That kind of the same thing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, like I said, high recommendation. Absolutely watch it. It's very much worth your time. Very much, especially now after a lot of the stuff's already happened. We've kind of seen it on the news. Well, thank you guys. It's been fun. Thanks for sticking with the meme documentary.
I mean, if there's ever going to be a meme documentary, I think this was definitely a good one.
And that will conclude this supersized episode of the Film Illiterates podcast. You can find more podcast episodes like this one on filmilliterates.com, and more videos of ours on youtube.com/filmilliterates. Alex, thank you for choosing this excellent documentary. And where can people find you online on the internet cultures, as the kids say?
Oh gosh.
Hello, fellow kids.
Other than the website and the YouTube channel where we've got a lot of old videos and stuff like that, and watch our old Pet Cemetery video that we did. But for myself, you can find me on Rate Your Music. You can find me on Letterboxd and My Anime List, all under the name Halfscrim, HALFSCRIM.
Nate?
You can find me here at Film Illiterates. And my apologies. I know like earlier on, I think my mic just went out. So it's just been an internal mic right now on my computer. So my apologies for the sound quality. But you can find me here at Film Illiterates. You can find me on Instagram as well as Letterboxd under Nathan_Stone.
And you can find me on Letterboxd and on Twitter under the username Film Illiterates. So yeah, keep everyone. Do we have another episode coming up next, or are we going to be taking a little break here?
I mean, this is going to take a while to edit. I think we've gone over like the hour and a half mark at this point, so it might take me a while to edit this one. So I'd say maybe it'd be healthy for all of us to take a break from the internet for a while and just go enjoy, go ride a bike, look at some frogs. It's just an appreciation.
So stay tuned for further episodes as we figure out what the next episode of Film Illiterates podcast is actually going to be. And with all that being said, keep watching movies and keep it easy.